You're just like your dad, Jackie. If I had a quarter for every time I heard that. The unfortunate part about that is that my dad is a third-star general in the loser army. So being a child of a loser can be really difficult. And I'm going to share with you how an ex-con came in my life and flipped that total script for me. Well, hello, darling, and welcome to the Just Jax podcast. Hi, I'm Jax, and I help you find the can in your cat. When we challenge our cats, miracles happen, because when I challenged mine of I can't draw, I can't paint, and I can't color, imagine my surprise when I discovered what I can do is create a 21-foot garden mural that was recently featured not once but twice on the front page of our local newspaper. Next up, I challenge the I'm no author, no artist, and no cursive writing specialist, but what I can do is self-publish 3 books for my kick-ass cursive writing curriculum, Crack the Cursive Code. I'm a jack of all trades, but what I master in is helping ordinary people like me to do extraordinary things through laughter, tears, life-changing stories, because metaphors are my jam. Together we can find the can in your can'ts, the do's in your don'ts, and the wills in your won'ts. I'm so excited for you. Let's go. I'm going to start this episode with a disclaimer. My mother has made some strides to be accountable for the distance in our relationship. But what really came to mind after I had recorded this episode, and what triggered me about it, is that it was about my dad yet again, and that it seems when it came to my dad, I just felt invisible. And this is going to kick off a series of podcasts regarding mental health and how to just get into a better headspace where you can laugh at your life as instead of cry. But crying is good. I get that, and I still cry, but I'd rather cry over happy stuff than despair and shame and such. So what sparked this episode is that I received a handwritten letter from my mother in the mail. Now, that is dating my mother and myself, that she still believes in handwritten letters and knows how to address an envelope. I had the absolute pleasure, delight, and what the fuck moment when I was at work and we had a young girl address a letter to send to a patient, and it got returned in the mail. And one of my duties was to process the mail. And the reason that it got rejected was because the address, she put the address at the top right corner of the envelope where the postmark, where the post office puts all of their information for mailing. It's where the stamp goes, etc. And little did I know that that generation of, I think she's 25, had no idea how to address an envelope. So I had the absolute pleasure of explaining to her that where everything goes. In that, my mother lives in Canada. I live in the United States at the moment, and she addressed this envelope. And because in Canada we have postal codes, and in the United States you have zip codes, and your zip codes, because as my husband told me, you have more people here, so your zip code has to have its own little zip code. And she put that in in an incorrect area that kind of confused where to take. Oh, you get to hear my cat sing. Oh, you're done. Okay, the beauty about that old boy is that we think he's deaf, and so we're wondering if he's using it like a radar, because sometimes he's in the strangest places and he does that noise. So if you're a cat lover or expert and you know why he's doing that wonderful little singing, you can always leave me a message on my Facebook and my Instagram. All right. So I received this handwritten letter from my mom. Now, this letter brings up a whole bunch of feelings for me because, first of all, my mother is pretty frugal in what she spends her money on. She's quite known for it, actually. And I'm surprised that she wants to go through all this effort to mail me stuff. Last time she sent me some random um papers from my past, and I had one letter I'd written my grandmother, and which was kind of cool, but I'm I go up there once or twice a year to go visit, and my sons go there weekly, if not bi-weekly, so she could give this stuff to my boys at any time for them to give to me. So instead of trusting these articles with my sons, she mails them to me. And I am still a little puzzled about why that is in regards to the mixed feelings. I have been manifesting while receiving random amounts of money, and my mother has sent money to me randomly through the mail. And so I had no idea what to expect. So part of me was a little excited to see because you can always use some extra cash. I had no idea what to expect. So I open it up, and the first thing is this newspaper clipping that's older than shit. And it's a Ann Landers column clipping. And Ann Landers was a advice column that ran for 47 years. It started in 1955, according to Google, and continued until the columnist, passed away in 2002. And she had 90 million readers. And it was the beginning of a self-help type of idea where you would write to this woman and then she would answer back with some advice. So this is what the column said. Daughter attempts reunion with dad. Dear Ann Landers, I have a dear dad story that will blow you out of the water. Also, I could use some advice. My parents divorced when I was 2. I'm 34 now. Dad married my mother's best friend. I didn't see him again until I was 7. I haven't seen him since. Dad supported me till I was 21 and wrote to me until I was 12. He promised to come see me several times, but somehow he never made it. I continued to write, but when I didn't receive any answers, I quit. There didn't seem to be much point in writing to a phantom. Recently, I learned that Dad was living in Naples, Florida, and I decided to call him. The conversation went like this. Me. Hello, may I speak to Mr. Williams? Him. Who is calling? Me. I am his daughter, Wilma. Him. This is Mr. Williams. Me. Dad. Him. Don't call me that. Me. Why not? Him. After all these years? Me. But I've been trying to find you. Your family wouldn't tell me where you were. Him. Don't give me that. And listen, do me a favor and don't call up here anymore. I don't want to have anything to do with you or your family. Then he hung up. At this point, I'm trying to get his address through the Naples postmaster. Now, remember, there was no internet at this time, and there was such thing as an unlisted phone number, kind of what mobile phones have done now, where there's no public record of what your phone number is. At that time, there was a public record of what your phone number was, and the only way to have privacy was to have an unlisted phone number. So if you had an unlisted phone number and you never gave out your phone, there was no computer to know what your address was. If if she had difficulty trying to find this guy, it was a real pain in the ass. You had to go to the library for everything. And so sometimes we can forget how the past had to navigate through some of these different obstacles. We can learn how to do a little bit more of that now. Anyway, at this point, I'm trying to get his address through the Naples postmaster. If I can get it, should I write to him or should I just show up at his front door? Or should I pretend he is dead? Long lost daughter. So there was always or I don't know, I call it a moniker, I guess, some kind of just name that just gave exactly what was going on. Dear long lost, Reread your letter to me. Take note of the fact that take note of the fact that your father did not see you for 5 years after he and your mother split. Note, too, that he stopped writing when you were 12 and that he never did come to see you. You should have told him to feed it to Sweeney. No idea what that means. If you obtain your dad's address, you might drop him a line with your phone number. If he wants to phone you, he will. But don't stand on one foot waiting, dear. And please don't go knocking on his door. You could set yourself up for another painful rejection that will sting forever. I'm sorry to say it, but this whole sad situation smells like a barrel of lost herring. Okay, that's another reference I've never heard of either. It smells like shit, but I guess you can't say that publicly on a newspaper. I was unsure really on what part is she wanting me to relate to. Is she wanting me to relate to the asshole dad or the advice to stay away from my dad? Because my mom has been obsessed with my dad until recently. It was about 2 or 3 weeks ago I realized that I always thought that I was broken because I have a very difficult time connecting to people. I am a loving person, but I've been called cold-hearted, etc., because when I walk away from something, I walk away from it and I can, I guess, compartmentalize, or I'm unsure of what skill this is. I don't know if it's a skill. A serial killer? But I came to the realization that my mother's obsession with my dad, and I would say it was obsession. I think that our relationship may have been in a different space if she pursued my affection and attention like she has pursued my dad's. In regards to what's happening with this dad here, there looks like was interaction with this individual, good, bad, or indifferent. My interaction with my dad was very limited. I have very few memories of him, really, other than I have I think a lot of it's blacked out. uh, uh, but the memories I do have, I just there's very little good there. But she, I left home at 18. My mom and dad had a divorce when I was 20. She recently stopped interacting with him I'd say about 3 or 4 years ago. But before that, she just took money to him, took food to him, all these different things. I just throwing her attention just for a scrap of something, and there was nothing there. And I never understood that. But that to me was a display of what love was. And if that was love, if that's what love is, fuck that. No, thank you. No, no. To have that kind of grief and control and just absolute uh, powerlessness, then to me, I yeah, it it just dawned on me. I'm like I said about 2 weeks ago that that's what my takeaway from that was, and that I am in fact just fine. I'm just recovering from what I thought love was, and that I can choose for myself what I want it to be. I was thankful for that, for the realization of that, and it was worth the weight in gold. But the other part of it is that she handwrote me an apology, and I feel horrible that it's thank you, but lately, my mom has been now to give some grace here. That generation of boomers and beyond. I don't even know what my mom is, a boomer plus. Like, what do you call someone that's past the boomer age? Jurassic? Like what? Anyway, being in your 80s, there was no such thing as help, and parenting to most was survival, and survival read into bullying and just doing what was necessary to survive. And became when life became easier to a degree, the bullying to survive still maintained. So my generation of parenting, there was a lot of bullying, and I carried some of that into my own with my own boys, where I became pretty hard and demanded respect. And respect through fear is a real problem, because if you respect through fear, there's always someone that's bigger than you that will then have shift of loyalties, because then they're afraid of someone else that's bigger. So respect through fear is a horrible way to get respect, because then you constantly have to keep them scared in order for them to follow you. So this new generation is struggling with getting the respect part, because sometimes you just gotta be fucking scared to get the message. But going there right off the bat is part part of the problem. Anyway, my mother sent me this apology, and I understand that she meant well, but she's in the very beginning healing stages of looking at her life. And as much as I appreciate that she has apologized to me for a couple things that have meant a lot for me, and I've appreciated them. But her main focus right now is still on my dad. And that has been her focus through me. It feels like my entire life. It's all she sees is my dad, and that I could have this with my dad. I could have that with my dad. I could have this with my dad, but there there is nothing there for me to have. Es I sent her a message, and it's been very difficult with the relationship with my mom, because the priorities have been up until this date her feelings, and she has trained me. I'm a very good soldier in regards to sacrificing my feelings for someone else. And that has been my journey, is learning that my feelings matter. And I have uh I have been very careful on setting boundaries and beginning to stand my ground, that I'm allowed to have feelings and I'm allowed to be taken care of, and that, you know what, that it's about time that someone actually thought about what my feelings are and who the fuck what like to take care of me. So I'm you can maybe call this a midlife crisis, or that I'm growing the fuck up, because I just am tired of it being all one-sided, and it has been for a very long time. And when it comes to my mom, I have been invisible for her for years. Other than her seeing me as someone evil, uh, I have been when she does see me, it's invisible. It's only through the eyes of who she wants me to be, and that's just like her. And unfortunately, I am just like my dad in that aspect, is that I am very different from her. I think differently. I look completely different. I actually thought that I was adopted until I was 25 years of age. That birth story that she told me was fucking bullshit, because we had very little contact with my dad's family, because they're fucking crazy. I guess my grandpa could be on like one of those true crime, not true crime, but he's just an asshole. Rumor has it, and this could be the telephone game or whatever, but I remember my mom was telling me she overheard dad and his siblings talking, as siblings will do when they are being completely candid. And apparently, my grandpa was so jealous of one of his children because of how intelligent they were, that he purposely had them go into a car accident with their head in the windshield while they were driving. So put the brakes suddenly or something, to just make them a little dumber than their dad. My dad apparently left home at the age of 9. He ran away to get away from his dad.
So, as much as my dad is a 3rd-star general in the loser army, he was an upgrade from his. And in how broken he was, he did a better job. Did he do what I needed? Oh, fuck no. Way no. Nope. No, nothing. But he was an upgrade. So, and that torch was passed to me. I am an upgrade to my dad. And my boy's dad is somewhat of an upgrade to my dad. But now they are to be an upgrade to me. And that's how you get out of these pits of bullshit, losership stuff, is that somebody has to decide to be an upgrade. And I decided to be one. And believe me, it is like everything that you see. It's the goo part of being a butterfly. To become a butterfly, you have to struggle to get out of the cocoon. There was this really story that told me that, about how this gentleman saw a caterpillar, and he was watching the caterpillar, and he put it in a little like terrarium to observe it and do whatever it needed to become a butterfly. And while he saw it struggle so bad to get out of the cocoon, he cut the cocoon open and put the butterfly down, and he took it and let it release the struggle. And the butterfly never flew properly, because in order to transition from a caterpillar to a butterfly, the goo has to be pushed through force through the ends of the wings to form the wings so that they could fly. So struggle was because that struggle was thwarted, the butterfly never became a real true butterfly and could fly. Ain't that a fucking metaphor? I should be levitating by now. That being said, uh my dad comes from a dark place, and he struggled with that dark place. My brother was the one that witnessed more of the dark place than I did. Thank God. This is one of the ways that I was gender abused, because I was forced to just be like a girl in my house. This was one of the times that I was protected, because the amount of time that I spent with my dad was very minimal. Thank God. Thank you for being born a woman. But my mother is still wallowing over her choice of marrying my dad, which was in 1964. They divorced in 1986. She's had a bit of time to get over it and move on. She has had another man in her life in between time, but my dad was still something, still was still her project. That's a good way to put that. She was still her project. I'm done with that type. You know how you do a one and done project? I did that. I have a quilt that I decided, you know what? I'm going to take up quilting. Now, did I do a elementary quilt? No, of course not. No, I did not. And I did it, and I think the blanket turns out to be 12 pounds, because I did flannel on one side, and I did that really cozy, it looks like popcorn type of, it's really soft on the back, over top of a queen size quilt, because I was always cold. And I moved to a climate where it never gets cold here. Well, it does to some degree, but to the point where I would use that quilt? No. Have I quilted anything since? No. Do I want to? Strike 3, you're out. No. So it's a one and done project, and my dad is a one and done project. There was a time in my life that, because I was so disconnected and in all areas of my life, mentally, emotionally, sexually, I thought that I somehow had been molested in my life. I have very little recollection of my past, but I showed all the symptoms of it with taking all these different courses and talking to counselors and going through different types of therapy to try and uncover what could cause it. I had a reoccurring nightmare in my past that I never understood what it was, and I always felt that my dad was kind of part of it. I never said that he was the cause. I just felt that he was kind of part of that. So you have a schizophrenic paranoid person as your father, and your mother has the bright decision to tell him what I'm feeling, which was none of her business to do. So my dad comes over to my place and he is just beside himself. He is uh, out of control, angry. I just called it he's in a spell. The good thing about this entire experience is that I met him as Jacqueline, not the little girl Jackie. And he came in and he was just screaming at me that I'm a liar. And I said, "A liar about what?" And because my mother hated the fact that I left the Catholic Church, he was saying, "Don't you think I don't know what's going on with that church of yours?" And he wasn't making any sense. "You're just a liar. You're just a liar. You're just a liar." And I said, "Well, can you tell me what this is about so at least I can talk about it?" And he just kept screaming about being a liar. And I lived in a mobile home at the time, and I knew that when I saw my dad coming at the door, I had the foresight of telling my boys to go into the very back room of the trailer so that I could protect them from seeing that. Physical illness is a lot easier for a child to understand than mental, and I had no idea how I was going to explain this, and I had no idea if my dad was going to get physical. I had no idea, and I just knew that uh, they had no they had no business seeing it. And plus, they had been visiting with him because how old were they then? They were what, like 6 and 4, maybe? Yeah, 6 and 4, and they had been going to the park to visit with him and feeding squirrels, as we found out it was illegal later. I'm sure my mom orchestrated that too. Anyway, it made my mom happy if I was in contact with my dad, which that was fruitless, really. So he was yelling at me, and then he looked, "Where are the kids?" And he goes down the hall and he goes into the back bedroom and he goes, "Your mom is a liar." He just starts screaming at the boys and he says, "I'm going to do everything in my power to take you away from her." And I had just gone through the court battle of getting my kids back. And I'm like, "Are you fucking kidding me, man?" And I started to panic. And then I realized that, okay, uh, I told him to leave the house or I'm going to call the police. And I told him that I am no longer your daughter and he's to get the fuck out of my house. It would have been fine if he would have stayed away from my children. Oh, and I was hoping it was something my boys would forget, but no. No. That's a story for another podcast. I'm going to read the message I sent my mom for you to understand why it was so necessary. My mother and I are probably 2 steps up from no contact. I have very little contact with her. The only contact I have with her is to make my sons' lives as easy as possible because I refuse to make it difficult for them to have a relationship with her. She lives in the town that they live in. I moved 800 miles away. So before anyone gets on any kind of horse about anything, I made the choice of moving 800 miles away to be away primarily. Well, honestly, I made a choice because my heart told me that my life was going to be here and that I needed to go here no matter what. It was a pilgrim's journey for me, and it was exactly what I needed to do. A fool's journey, if you want to take the fool's card in the tarot deck, I knew I had to be here. But I also knew that in order for my sanity to continue, I needed to live away from my mother because I bring out the worst in her and she thinks the worst of me. And that's that basically sums up our relationship. So when she sent me the letter, and I will keep the letter private because that's hers, but the gist of the message was that she apologizes for everything that she went through with me and my dad. Now, if she would have left my dad out of the letter and would have left this clipping out of my dad, I would have taken the apology and been very thankful. Although I really would like to know what she's apologizing for because she, I think, has no idea No, that's unfair because I have told her. She wants to apologize for things that she thinks she's done wrong instead of listening to the things that I'm asking for from her. And that also is a part of the problem we're having with our communication about feelings. I will be respectful for her because I I'm a well trained, but also again, I refuse to do what my mother has done to me, and that is pit my boys against me. So I learned this in the fight with the court battle. The sides have to be able to decide. Like if there are two sides to a story and you're wanting a third party to judge which side is better, best, good, bad, whatever, what the fuck, whatever it is. One side has to be able to stand and look like they've got their shit together and are doing the things that they're claiming to do, like walking the walk instead of just talking the talk. Eventually, the people who only talk the talk, their facade comes to light. And it's worked for me. Now, the long game has been a very hard game, but I went from being a super bitch to super mom, and I have now earned the respect. My older son is coming around. That's another complicated story. I understand why he's there. And I see that in the future we could become closer. That will happen a lot more when my mother dies. But until that time, I am very happy with where it is right now. We both struggled on how to have him succeed at things, and I chose the route of being very hard with it, and I'm living with the consequences of that. And the only difference between my mother and myself is that I own my shit. There's going to be two things that we're going to talk about in this episode. We're going to talk about flipping the script on the loser, and we're also going to talk about the difference between remorse and guilt. And I think we're going to do the remorse and guilt right now. So, what is the difference between remorse and guilt? Because when someone says, I'm sorry, there is there is an expectation that comes with that. Because someone can just say the words and have no action behind. And so, why is the action so important? And that's because talk is cheap. Lip service is fucking easy, especially in the heat of things. And when you no longer have the emotional passion for that subject, having to do it afterwards is a completely different thing. That's where the rubber meets the road. So I'm going to use another Bible story here because this one represents to me the biggest difference between remorse and guilt. And my mom feels like, to me, it feels more of a guilt type of feel, and I'll explain to you why after. Let's go into it. Remorse. The story is about Judas. Judas betrayed Christ when he found out that his plan, that the exact opposite was going to happen, that they were going to kill an innocent man. He was beside himself with guilt, and he hung himself because he sold a king for 30 pieces of silver, which was equal to the amount that you would pay for a slave. And when he realized that his master was going to die, he took his life and he hung himself. Now, that's what guilt does. Guilt kills you. Guilt has you destroy yourself. Whereas remorse is something different. And Peter was the one that experienced remorse. Something changes in Peter, and he realized that he had made a mistake. But what was different with Peter is that he realized that he did something wrong and that he misrepresented something and that he was going to do everything in his power to make it right. And that's what remorse does. Now, people can take remorse to the part where they can do wrong with it as well, but there's a changed behavior. There is a transformation, it's hard to put into words exactly what it happens, but you're no longer the same person you were before because you realize, like this issue with my mom about the waking up, about the connection. I'm like, wow, now I get to decide if I want to go through that entire love, grief experience because I've never gone through that. I've had pets die, people die, my brother died. I never even cried over my brother. Now he was a jerk, but Still, for me, it's a challenge now for me to do that, to do something completely different, and now with the information, become someone new. With my mother, with the information, I told her what my heart was, and her answer is, "I don't remember that," which has 0 accountability. And it's to me, it's a Judas answer because Judas died, but so did emotionally, our relationship died because there's nothing to go forward if there's no accountability. When when I moved to the United States, I was a dumpster fire of a person. I was having I was at the end of my chaos years. Although I created some chaos to get out of my chaos years. Happy chaos, I guess, the beginning of my happy chaos transition. And my younger son, I had to listen to him for a long time. He dumped all of the areas in which he felt that I was an absolute bitch, where he was scared of me and how I made him feel and all this. And it went for quite a while. But I finally, and it was almost becoming like a game he was kind of enjoying. He was a teenager. I think he was 15, 16. And it was kind of a game at that time to uh, call your mom a bitch. And, uh, but since I earned it, I listened to it and allowed him to unleash. At one time, and then I said to him, I said, "So, um, tell me, am I the same person? Am I responding the same way that I have been your entire recollection of our experience?" And he said, "No." I said, "Okay, I do understand that this is a short time that I've been like this, okay? But it is different. I am different. I want to be different. I'm working on being different." And it's so funny because my mom used to say to me, why do you have to be so different?" Well, because if what you're selling is miserable, then I want to be fucking different. Um, but time and will need to pass for you to feel safe enough again. But I am telling you that I am unwilling to be locked in this cage of being called this way or this type of interaction or who we are for long. So you can decide realistically how long that needs to be, but I'm telling you it will come to an end, and then we can start building. How do you feel about that? And he says, "Well, that sounds fair." I said, "Because if someone's in a prison sentence and you can tell that there's been remorse, this is the difference. There are people that go through that system, whether it's only 10%, I don't have know how many ideas there are, but there are some people, and whether or not they found Jesus, whether or not they did that, there are transformational things that happen. And there is remorse where they do realize that they have wronged, made mistakes, redoing, and want to become a better person." And what a perfect segue to the next portion of my story. Uh, just to stir up things even more with my religious friends, I am a clinically trained hypnotist. Yes, 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 yes. You heard that.
I'm very excited, darlings, because I have 2 episodes coming up that are going to be with different types of hypnosis therapy. And in fact, next week's episode, I am going to be having a chit chat with Kimberly Lynn, and she is a board certified hypnotist, which means that she's as high as you can go in the education program and with hypnosis. And she's going to talk about how hypnosis can help you. With Kimberly, we studied the same hypnosis material, and she took it to like a PhD level. Well, I just went to the graduate program. Whereas with another guest that I have coming up, an interview, is with Brenda Johnston, and she is a subconscious mindset strategist. It's it's difficult to describe what she does, but I can sure tell you the effect of working with her. And we will be having an interview with her as well. I had my practice for a short time, and just before COVID hit,
and I was struggling with my practice, but I believe I did make an impact on the people that I helped. One of my one of my clients was an ex-con, and he was coming to me for gambling issues. The man had won, oh, huge amounts of money, but he lost even more. And when we were going into why he was being a gambler, I said, "Oh, I understand why you have a issue with gambling." He goes, "Why?" I said, "Because you're a loser." He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Because you lose all the time at gambling, right? So you have to reinforce yourself how much of a loser you are." I said, "Have you ever thought of reinforcing you being a winner?" And he just looked at me as if "What?" I said, "Well, yeah." I said, "If you feel that you're a loser on the inside and you tell yourself you're a loser, then you're going to manifest. If you vibrate at loser value, you're going to manifest things in your life that continuously reinforce how much of a loser you are." So, and especially in gambling, that's double time, really, because losing. Not only are you losing money and you're losing at life because you're becoming a loser, right right to the literally. And I said, "Well, why is it so hard to be a winner?" He goes, "Well, there's no way I can be a winner because I'm just like my dad." I'm like, "Are you fucking kidding me, man?" I'm like, "Why are you sent here for me?" Why were you really sent here for me? Because I will give my mom credit. I forget how many years ago now, she did tell me a couple things about my dad that were redeemable, that he was ahead of his time in some inventions in regards to welding, and uh, he was supposed to be in a newspaper, but someone stole his idea. And because of that, and because of how broken he was never able to recover from that, and because of how broken my mom was, she was never able to help him to recover from that, and because of how broken their parents were in that generation was, they never accepted help to get to be able to get over that or help them with that. Ugh. Uh, and our generation wonders why the newer generation wants nothing to do with some of the stuff that we were brought up with. I get it. How how they're handling it sometimes is fascinating, but I do understand the motive. When you pop a zit that's been festering for a long time, you have no control how that pus is going to go everywhere. Zero control. And how much fascination is there on Dr. Pimple Popper and all those, on how watching all that pus comes out? Well, this is the pus, my friends, of the oppression and bullying and labeling that we have lived with and thought it was comfortable. And this generation wants to change that. And it is as messy as the sore that it's been lanced open. And until all that pus clears and it heals, it's going to be a little messy. So back to my guy. And I'm like, "What are you talking about? You're just like your dad." "Well, my dad is a con, and so I'm a con, and I'm just like my dad." I'm like, "Well, why do you have to accept that?" Well, he goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well," and that's the part about growing up. There comes a time and a place where you really can leave certain parts of your parents behind. Like my mom, there are certain things. And when I start acting like her and those things that I don't like, I have the choice then of whether or not to keep them or to get rid of them, because that's the part of growing up and being an adult. If you're expecting someone else to take care of you and take care of your own personal shit, that is where you're still being the child in this situation. And you need to just grow up and take care of it. Like if it's and I'm telling you right now, it's nowhere near as bad as you think, because if it was true, you would feel different. There are truths about yourself. There's truths about me. I have dark shadows. I have things. I have had persecution. I've persecuted. I have been betrayed and I have betrayed. There are dark things in my past too, and they're true about me. But at the same time, like, if you look at a tapestry, it's gotta have some dark and shadows in there or it's fucking boring to look at. There's nothing, it's all light. So, those dark shadows are part of your tapestry, and all I can do is work with them and understand why they're there, and make sure they're fucking mine. Because now I'm realizing all this fear that I had about connecting and stuff like that, I was never broken. I just really if that was the Kool-Aid of what love was, I never wanted to drink it. And then you see the stuff on the media, it's no different, right? Everything is supposed to be so dramatic. And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. I still struggle with that." Anyway, we went through some work for him to allow him to shed the skin of what his persona of who he was under the "just like your dad" shell and become "just like myself" shell, and figure out who he wanted to be and allow him to claim himself to be a winner. Because he's a winner at a lot of things. He wins on his ride home. He wins on when he gets a green light. And he wins when he gets a job. He wins when someone smiles at him. And there's lots of times that you can be a winner, but if we only put it to material gain, then we really truly will be losers. So came back to him and I said, "I know what loser is now. And I make sure that when I'm a loser, I made an acronym of it. And I actually made a t-shirt of it too. So it's part of my loser merch that you'll find on my Crack the Curse Code website. And there's many different versions of the actual graphic. And it's L stands for living, O stands for out, S stands for someone, E stands for else's, R stands for reality. Loser is when you live out someone else's reality. When you put on someone else's skin, someone else tells you you should be, someone else thinks that you should be a certain way. And there are parts of it that can be true, but there are parts that are for someone else. And when you can step out of that skin, and that's, I guess, what I did when I was in my last episode, when I was talking about sitting on the bench and in the church. And that's when I shed my skin or got out of my cocoon and really wrestled through. The next few years were really rough. That was, oh my gosh, the wrestling that I went from that church bench to moving to the United States was probably the most tumultuous, going from one goo of a caterpillar, going through the goo phase to where I am now. Has been difficult, but I had to shed the living out someone else's reality. I had to shed what my mom thought of me and how she portrayed me, that it was my job to take care of her feelings all the time, that it was my number one priority when I was around her or anything to do with her, that shed the skin that I can take the parts of my dad that were great and let him be his own loser, and that's him. Uh, just because I have his blood gives me also a lot of ancestral things that were good as well. Because my dad was a brilliant man. He just sabotaged himself. But that him sabotaging himself, well, I guess I'm just like my dad. I've had to restart myself a couple times too. But I can give it back. I can take that shit, give it back to them, and what's left, I can make it into fertilizer and grow. And that, I guess, is what my biggest hope for in this podcast is that you can be like, if I can in any way help you be able to navigate toxic parents, toxic family members, being able to find your boundaries, find your voice. It's scary. I brought on another physical ailment in my stomach because my mother asked how she could listen to my podcast. I'm like, holy fuck. I'm especially with the last episode when I was talking about my experience with her on her Catholic faith. And when that one came out, she wanted to listen. And I'm like, oh, great. And that triggered it for me again, made me physically ill because I am so drained. And the illness came from the constant working through the feeling is that her feelings are her responsibility. My feelings are mine. I was polite, respectful. Oh, and another perfect segue. And I'm going to close this with reading what I read to her. And hopefully, if in any way this helps you be able to set boundaries with your people, then I have done what I've come to do. So it says, "Hey there, I received your letter. Dot 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 caught me by surprise." And so the next part I explained to her, she has put the zip code part in a strange place. And I was just explaining to her, as I told you earlier, I explained to her where it would go so she would know. And then I said, "Thank you for your apology." And I sent a heart. "I want to help make something a little more clear. The trauma that you have experienced from my dad is huge, and it is. And there is no dismissing it. There's no minimalizing it. There's nothing like that. She went through shit with him, and I do understand a lot of it was because my brother and I were in that world, and she earns all my respect for, and I'll say that in a minute here. I want to help make something a little more clear. The trauma that you have experienced from my dad is huge, but mine has been dealt with to the point that I no longer have anger there. And that is true. Uh, it's really hard to hold something against someone who's broken and comes from such a broken place. I would love him in an ideal situation to be something more than he is, but this is who he is. And I can still be mad because he refuses to be better or bigger or greater, but really, well, now that's an impossibility because I'm unsure he even knows where he is. But to expect anything like that, it's pointless. It's almost like I'm looking for a reason to be mad now for myself, because maybe I need that reason to be mad to hold me back from something that I'm supposed to be doing, because projecting it onto something that is impossible to change is is a waste of resources in my mind. But and that's the way I've started to look at it. "I realize that you have a lot to work through," I said, "but fortunately, I have little to work through with my dad and no longer need to rehash it. He has been out of my life for close to 30 years and with only one contact in 2013. I forgot about, if I'm going to use 30, I forgot the death of my brother. He came back for a short time then, and that was just what the fuck. Anyway, our relationship distance has very little to do with my time at home. I have the utmost respect for what you accomplished despite him trying to sabotage everything," which is true. The fact that she was able to hold it together despite him is a fucking miracle, really. "The real strain came when I left the Catholic Church and my boy's dad. My dad had very little to do with either issue. I appreciate the care and gentle pushing that you have given consistently towards dealing with my dad, but that's what I have done for the last 30 years. Constant form of therapy and courses. He's already reached the third star general in the loser army, and very little can make him worse or better. In fact, the last time we had a message conversation about my dad, she had to make sure I knew that she found out that he cheated on her when I was like 3 or something like that. And I'm like, really? I said, "You were lucky. You can channel all this hatred to him, but I've decided to stop and only focus on what he has taught me. He is your ex," I put in capitals, "husband, but he is my dad. It's too hard on your heart to constantly go over what a loser is because he's my blood," in capitals, "which I can never escape and have my own battles to deal with being his daughter. Every time you bring up how much of a monster he is, dot, 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 I have to deal with, dot, 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 am I like this too? Especially all the times you told me I'm just like my dad. I wish you would have said that in a way that I could be proud. Hard to find, I realize, but I am dealing with something similar with my boys right now with their dad." I said, "Bottom line, it's their dad," in capitals. "Poisoning a child against their parent is simply poison. Plus, you never had this dad trauma. He hurt you as a wife, which is different because you had the power to leave him and cut him out of your life. Whether you exercise that choice is irrelevant. I'm stuck with him being my dad, and nothing can ever change that. And I have accepted that and look for strengths that he gave me." All right. And she has now not ghosted me, but if I send her any kind of message like I would have in the past, she is now just sending me the thumbs up symbol. Because again, um, It's about her feelings. To give her space is a very easy thing to do for me. I've become very good at it. There have been some heartfelt apologies that she has given. She has been very vague on her apologies, but I do know that apologizing for that generation can be very difficult. So, in lieu of the apologies that she has given, and I have seen some change in behavior, there's remorse there instead of guilt. And that's actually one of the problems that I have with my mother pretending that nothing's happened, because it's almost like I have to re-traumatize myself to keep telling the story, because she makes it look like it's all me and I'm the one that has to make all the effort. And I'm telling you, it's a very difficult situation because my mother taught my son well. So it's all my fault while my mother and I don't have a relationship, and it's all my fault that my son and I don't have a relationship. So isn't that convenient for both of you? It's very convenient for my mother, because for her, the child is the one that's responsible for doing all the healing, leg work, what the fucking ass licking, whatever, butt kissing, ass licking, butt kissing, whatever. And in my son's relationship, the parent has to do all the exact same thing. I'm like, fuck you both, man. That means that I'm responsible for everything. And you know what? If I'm that powerful, then bring it. Because no, that means both of you, he learned really well of zero accountability. Fuck that. Nope. No. So you got a little window into the soul of my experience lately with my mom. And I am very proud of me. I'm proud of how I've handled it to this point. I'm proud of the boundaries that I've set. I'm proud uh, of who I am, who I've become because of her, both of who she is and who she isn't. And I still am like Salem Lights. I have a long way to go, baby, in some aspects, but I've come a long way too in others, and I'm happy with where I am. Next 4 episodes are all going to be about mental health. And this one was the one to kick it off, to remember that the only time you're a loser is when you live out someone else's reality, or you have absolutely no remorse for what you have done in regards to yourself and to anyone else. And that if you stay in guilt, nothing changes. But if you have remorse, you can start the goo process. And I wish I could promise that the goo process will be a fun, great time, but you always have me here as your goo sister, because these wings have been earned, and you can earn yours too. And you can get in touch with me and share how this story touched your lives on my Facebook or Instagram. You can leave me a 5-star review as well, because that would be great, because that would help other people also be able to get over their losership. And you can check out my loser merchandise on crackthecrisp.com. I have lots of different shirts, but if you're really interested in something different, you can always contact me and we'll make that happen. If you also have a question, you can contact me at #HeyJax on Reddit, and it can springboard another episode, of course, with your permission. In the meantime, remember that all that shit you've been through, some needs to go back. It really does. It belongs to someone else. You're carrying out someone else's shit. And then the rest of the shit is yours, and you can turn that into fertilizer. Love you. Jax out.